today what we're going to hear from her is more for Generation Z.
You develop a vision, but you can't do it alone. So on one hand, being informed is great, but on the other hand, there is always the danger of never coming to a right conclusion.
We have these visions and they largely come from Bollywood, I think, and you broke that myth.
Gender is no more a barrier. Officer doesn't have a gender. And I would rather stay with everyone, work with everyone, run with everyone, eat with everyone. So I had to break a stereotype bias which was there, and that helped the next set of women. There's a woman even on Siachen base. When I nurture my younger colleagues now, the first thing I teach them is delegation. And I share this with all the younger women that be less than perfect. It's not always a 50-50. The reason if that becomes a bone of contention, the marriage will fall apart. And where a woman can nurture and use her nurturing qualities, she brings it to the boardroom, she brings it to the office, she brings it to her space. But it has to start with her family. I mean, your certain things like motherhood only comes to a woman. So why not we enjoy it and we'll have it all.
Everything else which is happening around you, which is in short, work politics. And that's the elephant in the room nobody likes to talk about. A lot of organizations try to pretend it doesn't exist.
When you come back, you have life experiences which no office or no textbook can teach you. And you come back with a compassion and make a better leader. When you start opening and you say, okay, this door is shut, that is when you start looking at all the windows that are open. Whenever I talk with youth and I reach out every time, I tell them, find your ikigai. Just put that little bit for what the world needs. So I think that is when things will change.
It is such a pleasure to have with us today Lieutenant General Madhuri Kanetkar, who is Maharashtra's first and India's third woman to be the most senior person in the Indian Army. Today we are going to talk about nurturing inclusive leadership. A lot has been said about Dr. Madhuri Kanetkar's journey, about how she progressed, what she did, about her own work-life balance, her challenges on the personal and professional front. But today what we are going to hear from her is more for Generation Z, not just for women, but other people who identify in different ways, people with disabilities, people who come from all walks of life, people with socio-economic backgrounds who could even never dream of being doctors or joining the Indian Army. So what a pleasure to have you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be in a chat with you, having met you, seen your own achievements through challenges. I mean, that is what is life.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My first question to you is, it starts like a rapid fire, but it's going to be your first questions. What does leadership mean to you in brief?
Taking a team along, ruling with the head, but leading with the heart.
What a lovely sentence. So do you want to elaborate on what you just said about?
I've often talked about this, that leadership is not just, taking all the correct decisions, but taking the correct decisions for all the people and how to take teams along. So for that, when you first identify goals, you identify targets, you develop a vision, but you can't do it alone. Realizing that you need to take and developing people to walk along with you or take them along, I think that requires a correct balance of a head and a heart. So there's strictness. At the same time, you have to understand people. It's people who make the success possible.
So this is a question from, on behalf, I would say, of the current generation, and they like choice, right? I think a generation before or before that accepted that a lot of times you don't have the choice and you have to go with whatever there is. But they like the choice. They like to know what's going to happen, what are they expected to do. Then they will think of whether to join or do that job or not. So, what would be your advice to that?
I think it works as a double-edged weapon. When you went to buy a toothpaste and there was Colgate and Colgate was called toothpaste and toothpaste was called Colgate. So you went to the market and picked up a tube. Today, you're spoiled for choices, the size, the content, and you're reading labels, and you could spend hours doing that. So on one hand, being informed is great, but on the other hand, there is always the danger of never coming to a right conclusion in the correct time frame. It's not forever. Life is not forever. So I feel, to my advice to the younger generation is, think quickly, analyze, pick a choice, and then make that work for you instead of keeping on waiting for the best choice. There's nothing like a best choice. You have to choose what is appropriate, what is culturally acceptable, what is there available to you, what you can do. So you quickly analyze these things, make your choice, and then make that your best choice. I think that is my advice.
Perfect, perfect. That's excellent. And you once said that, there are a lot of myths about women in the army, about the army itself, because for us outsiders who've never been in the army, we have these visions, and they largely come from Bollywood, I think, and where we start imagining that somebody goes into the army and then starts fighting, and you broke that myth. So if there was anybody who wanted to join the army in any capacity today, what do you think they should expect? And the second is that when you nurtured people in the army, nurtured new leaders in the army, what did you do for them?
I think today, again, in your choices, a huge number of options are available for children, because the armed forces over time, in the last 40-50 years, has opened its doors to every avenue. So you have not just technical people like the medical, our time it was just medicine and nursing which had women in uniform. But today they are having it in arms services. Air Force has fighter pilots. Women have them going on ship on the Navy. You even have combatants. You have Agniveers. The artillery has women. So the options are, so gender is no more a barrier. And just the way today, gender has been, a time will come where we'll be more inclusive of everyone. In any case, the armed forces is one organization in the country. There are no reservations. There's no political this thing. There is no caste. There's nothing, there's no religion. We have just national spirit as our religion. You don't ever think of whether you're a Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, So it's really anyway inclusive. So I think it's open to anyone. But while doing that, I would caution the youngsters, it's not romanticizing a career. You watch it in movies, you see those parties, and you see a very glamorous kind of, it's the hard work. If you're not made of that stuff, it's better not to take up something that you will find. So firstly, you have to be mentally fit, physically fit, mentally strong, physically fit. So that a fit mind in a fit body is the first thing that's required to be in the armed forces, because your work demands that, you would be, and then you don't want to be sidelined as a gender, this thing. I remember when we joined, we were hardly any women who joined the armed forces. And the first time, my batch of, about 16, 17 girls who moved out of AFMC, as a test case, we were the first set of women sent to field hospitals. And it was something novel. So I was marched up to the GOC, there's a woman, and I had to assert, and then they tried to bring in the gender lens and say, you have to stay in a officer's mess, you can't stay in the bashas, there are no women there. But I said, officer doesn't have a gender. And I would rather stay with everyone, work with everyone, run with everyone, eat with everyone. So I had to break a stereotype bias which was there, and that helped the next set of women. Today the women are in field, there's a woman even on Siachen base. So see, this is how the women before me who opened up the doors, and then we who opened up and became role models for a whole lot of others, that if they could do it, we can do it, and we can do it better.
I think what you said right now is so perfect about neutralizing,
Yes.
right, your identity. And this is really what inclusion has been about, right? So you spoke about my work, and one of the things I do when I teach students in Kolhapur, in Sangli, or rural parts of Maharashtra, is the first thing I do in the class is ask them to get up and sit next to a girl, and get the boys to sit next to the girls sit next to the girl, because they still don't do it.
Yeah.
And you know, when we passed out of college so many years ago, that was a bit, yes, but today it's not needed. And I'll tell you where that's coming from. That's coming from a lot of Indian families still, putting this into people's heads, especially boys, not just the girls, but even the boys, that look at a girl as a girl, look at a boy as a boy.
Yeah.
And what you said is so important, because the
Yeah.
first step towards leadership in the first place is
Yes.
that, how do you feel like when you report to a woman? How do you feel like report to, in the future, someone who identifies as trans or whatever
Yeah.
else? So that's the first step.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm now going to come to the question for you, where I think every young leader, every new leader, when they're a leader for the first time, they grapple with it. That I don't think I can give this job to someone else. I have to do it myself to be able to do it perfectly.
Yeah.
Right. So when you first faced that, how did you,
I think
delegate?
you brought it out very beautifully, because when I nurture my younger colleagues now, the first thing I teach them is delegation. Because, and I've found that this problem, I mean, though it is nothing to do with the gender, but it's more with women. Because being at heart a perfectionist, she feels only I can do it and no one else can do it, the way I want it to. So to them, I give a message: be less than perfect. And this is not my own. This was what my husband told me way back, when I was trying to do it all and killing myself. And it would land up me frustrated, angry, making things difficult for the family. And when he said this to me and I introspected, I reflected, and I said, yes. I mean, does it matter to them that everything is spick and span? Happiness is not that. So I had to also adjust, adapt. And I share this with all the younger women, that be less than perfect, and don't, you handhold, you support, but don't tell each one how to do it. You tell them where to go, what you want done, but the how should not be stressed upon too much. And at the same time, also let them know, but if you have a problem, I'm available to discuss it. I'll handhold you where you feel you have a difficulty in crossing that bridge, but otherwise you have to cross your own bridges.
That is such excellent practical advice. I'm
Yeah.
sure every leader, every new leader and first time leader, would need it. I'm now going to come to something which I had hoped would change when when I first encountered this way back 20 plus years ago, when I used to work for DataQuest. And we'd done this survey about women and women's progression in the IT industry. And actually, you do it in any industry today, you'll find the same thing, even in 2025. Is that at the start, in medical colleges, of course, engineering colleges, management colleges, you find a very high percentages of women now in class. And, that's excellent. That's the way our nation is headed. So the aspiration is so high, parents are so progressive, everything's going well. And 5 years down the line, you see less women as they go up the ladder. 10 years down the line, it's even less. 15 years, 20 years, when it comes to the board level or your level in the army, it's just gone. They're hardly there. And then you're struggling to find, some token women to put on a board and, to say, okay, here says, woman achiever. And I would like to say that, have we suddenly become less intelligent, less competent? And obviously we haven't. And that's the reason is still the same. It's our social fabric, which expects women to relocate. A route, which still remains is the expectation. As soon as you finish your medical education, any education, you're expected to, find a partner, of course, which is great, but relocate to wherever the partner is going to be. And it's so strange we are saying this when, India's first woman, Dr. Anandi Joshi, this very city of Pune, she went alone to 3 to 4 years on her own with crowdfunding, and her husband was obviously more than supportive that time. And even in 2025, we are doing the same thing. So the first is relocation, second is the first child and the second child and all of that. And through your career, your life, you broke all of it. And that's what I would, love to hear from you, for not just the young generation, but also their parents and
Yeah,
families
yeah.
who are still expecting them to relocate.
Yes. I think that is sort of a stereotype, expectation, and a bias that society has put on the woman. But having said that, things are changing. Things are changing. It always, in the beginning, it is the first few, but then they become role models. And in that, I think it's changing because slowly the men are getting empowered. You know, what I've always talked is along the way, we assumed because of certain societal pressures, the woman was submerged, and we kept developing her. So we started raising girls up as boys, but we forgot to raise up boys as girls.
So
I
true.
mean, I think that's the bottom line because in life, it's a partnership. And if the woman agrees to relocate, it should be her choice. It's not that she shouldn't. Because if you're dogmatic about it, that it's my way or highway, the marriage is going to break, which is happening in a large number of cases. Because the women are sometimes, so it has to be a mutual this thing, and that comes out of mutual respect. And therefore, I mean, I'm very proud to say that I was supported by my husband, and he keeps relocating every time. Like after he retired, it's been now 10 12 11 years he's retired, but it was a choice he made, and he didn't bother what society or his friends or this would say. And he takes pride in saying, I move with her and I live in her house. So it's a day is not far when this would be accepted. Initially it's novel, like when we joined the army. Today it's commonplace. So I think it should be by mutual respect, mutual this. But at the same time, I would also put a word of caution to the women that don't make it about equal. Don't every time make it about my turn and your turn. It's not always a 50-50. The reason, if that becomes a bone of contention, the marriage will fall apart. And I wouldn't say it is this, but I think it's a strength of a woman to be able to understand and take a family along. And where a woman can nurture and use her nurturing qualities, she brings it to the boardroom, she brings it to the office, she brings it to her space, but it has to start with her family. You can't preach what you don't practice. So it has to start with your family. And therefore, I mean, adjusting, giving in, take nurturing should be there. Or even if you're a career person, I think if you love cooking, you enjoy it. You don't feel ki why should I be doing it. I mean, your certain things like motherhood only comes to a woman. So why not we enjoy it and we'll have it all?
Yes.
So I feel it's a both way. I mean, though the society needs to accept much more, but I feel a woman should also be because she is capable of it. Not because she has to do it, but because she's capable of it.
That is such valuable advice,
Yeah.
really. Such wisdom. Thank you for that. A little tough question. What is the biggest failure you've had in your life? And what would you say about failure to people who are afraid of failure?
I mean, for me, failures were more to do with, where there were differences, where I felt a gender, this thing did come up in my way. So that would really cause a difficulty. I'll give a simple example. When I joined the armed forces, AFMC, except for the girl while in a joining merit who would given permanent commission, all others were given short service. And within 3 years, we had the same training as the boys. And I, for no reason, after coming meritorious, I should have been top of the batch. But somewhere 20 years in my seniority, I was pushed down to the bottom of the batch, saying that you were a short service, which was not something that I had a choice about. So it was very unfair. And that was, I felt frustrated. I felt, it's a failure, but I decided not to keep fighting because then I wouldn't move ahead. So instead of going to court, instead of, making an issue out of it, I chose to take that challenge as an opportunity to find newer these things. And I think again, help myself to that. Another point of time where I felt really, is when I was torn up between profession, between my family, which had been divided into three parts. Son was in Pune, husband in Hisar, daughter and me in Pathankot. Mother went into coma, and I felt I should have been here to be, the eldest child, and we are three sisters. So at that time, I was extremely frustrated that I'm not being able to, or not being able to pursue my own career. But at that point, taking a thing, what matters most, whenever these things came, I said, in the long run, at the end of, maybe 20 years from now, 40 years from, what is it that's going to matter to me? Is it getting this now, or having handled it but taking a step back? And I would get the answer, ki maybe take a step back now. And I feel in hindsight, using that thought process in my most tough moments of taking a step back and coming back with the force was my winning, which I didn't know at that point. But I can confidently say it helped me.
Wow, that is such quiet confidence.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come to the last question. It's the elephant in the room. When people in middle management, okay, so junior management is start off, first time excitement. Middle management, they often lose their sense of purpose. And it's happened to all of us. That why am I doing this? Why am I here? What's happening? And what's a lot of times very, very frustrating is everything else which is happening around you, which is in short, work politics. And that's the elephant in the room nobody likes to talk about. A lot of organizations try to pretend it doesn't exist. And that is the kind of resilience you have shown, I'm sure. And, nothing was easy by the time you reached there. So what has been your, I would say, defense mechanism to fight that politics, or how do you deal with it, at all?
In my own thing, it wasn't such a problem, because mid-level is something we are still in our professional this. So there's a career progression where competence is the only thing that matters, as compared to when I see younger people. And what you rightly said right in the beginning, in our healthcare professional setup, we have 60%, and in nursing maybe 80% are women. So that inclusivity. But when you lead up to leadership positions of principals, vice chancellors, there are hardly any. And when it comes to, I just gave a talk in Women in Science at the India International Science Festival, and you won't believe it, even after so many years, women in science are to the maximum of about 18%, that's less. And of that, not even 10% reach leadership positions, which is really bad. And I think the reason is at that mid-career level. That is the time where she's really pulled apart, because that time she has a role as a mother. And whatever you say, the child needs the mother. Let's be clear. And I think it's nice that the nation is slowly recognizing, and most of the schemes are giving opportunities for a comeback, which was not there. I, in the armed forces, in that sense, couldn't have left and come back. But today, women have that choice and should make it, and not look it as a setback. Because when you come back with a whole lot of experience. So you have maybe you didn't work in your office for a couple of hours, or you took a step back and did a part-time, or did a consultancy, or a work from home. But when you come back, you have life experiences which no office or no textbook can teach you. And you come back with a compassion and make a better leader. And that is why we are moving from tokenism to true inclusivity. Otherwise it was a tick mark that you have those two women. But today they're actually seeking out. I have been a doctor, but there are so many companies who requested me to be on their boards. And I said, what have I got to do? They said, no, it's not about, we want your wisdom. So see, along the way, you've collected information, knowledge, and this circle goes on. But wisdom comes with experience, and a woman gets double experience. She gets running, she's all ministries in one at home. So that experience, life lessons that you learn come in a big way, and that is going to help them. So to all the women who are at that mid-level, I tell them, look out for opportunities. There's a lot happening. So don't treat it as a setback, but treat this as a challenge, and there is no problem without a solution. When you start opening and you say, okay, this door is shut, that is when you start looking at all the windows that are open. So you just put those down and say, okay, this may not, continuing this would have been the best, but great, I'm doing a mid-career change and I jump into something totally different and I find my way, and the experience of these years is going to make her give a head start. And I'm telling this from a practical thing. I couldn't get into my super specialization. You know, I went back, I took gaps. Then I went in for a PG. Then I again spent another 10 years as a pediatrician, then went in for nephrology. It could have been a setback. That while others went into continuous and every doctor, you know, specialization, super specialization, you're not adding layers of experience. So I felt when I went back after, you know, at mid-career and started training again, I was much more faster in grasping and implementing what I'm learning. So I think that advantage we forget. And therefore I would tell all the young girls out there, or not for, why just gender? There would be even the male gender, anyone. You do have setbacks. And at the time, it's not important that you fell down. No, it's always said how you rise up. And you may bounce up even faster with a more resilience. And that is the difference between a winner and one who gives up.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. I'd just like the last word from you, because you've written about this, you've spoken about this before, about inclusive workplaces and what an inclusive workplace would look like, as we said, with anybody who identifies as anything, with any kind of disability, obviously, you know, caste, creed, color, we won't even go there because that is accepted and that is understood. But everybody really coming from all strata of society. I would like to just have one, you know, last word from you, is that how can that happen? What should, you know, workplaces do to make that happen?
I think it will have to start with each and every individual. See, our Prime Minister is talking of a Viksit Bharat 2047, right? 100 years. And we can do that only if the weakest in your herd, your strength is as much as the weakest link. So taking people along is very important, and it doesn't matter across boards, and sensitizing the younger generation that look, it matters. You moving ahead, if you're not supported, the pyramid will collapse. I think that is a sense which is very, very important, and COVID showed us this. You know, when we sat in our comfort zone and let the lesser privileged or those get it, they developed immunity, and then when it hit us so hard. And nations who kept this thing in the long run, they realized. Whereas India's policy of sharing vaccines with everyone, giving it to everyone, and we came out winners. So it's a very classical case of inclusivity. And whenever youngsters take that on, I think that is so important. I'll give an example in this, how it can be done. That our youth has to change it. Nothing else, no policy, no this, because all that will remain on paper. The Viksit Bharat is going to be today who are the youth and the young adults. They are going to be the leaders when 47 we are Viksit. So if they start with this thought process, and I saw an example just yesterday, the students of BJ Medical College have started an organization called LFU, Lift for Upliftment. And I thought it's so beautiful that the top students are taking out 5 days of the year, if you look at it, and hours which they put in, and each one chooses a subject, and they are coaching tribal and rural children, marginalized population, the have-nots. It is only when we get the have-nots will we see a Viksit Bharat. So it doesn't matter whether it's disability, whether it's because of, it's an ability. Don't look at what they don't have. There's so much that they have. And there are so many organizations which are doing this and are all lauded for that, because they all add to your economy, they add to the workforce, and they strengthen you because you learn a lot from them. So taking people along from every walk of life, every strata of life is the true path to success. So I think there is no doubt in that. It will have to come when our youth, and if the youth has to change, we are the mentors. If we mentor them to reach out, take a little bit of yourself, and I use the word ikigai because that book is so beautiful. So whenever I talk with youth and I reach out every time, I tell them, find your ikigai. Just put that little bit for what the world needs. The world needs you to bring inclusivity, diversity, equitability, give equal opportunities. It doesn't matter the rest of it. So I think that is when things will change.
That is such a brilliant example. Thank you so much. And that was for us, Dr. Madhuri Kanitkar, giving us a very novel, progressive message about Ikigai, the Japanese concept. But she was really talking about taking the lowest common denominator, right? Like taking the lowest possible person in the team together with the one with the most disadvantage and taking them along and nurturing. And that is what inclusive leadership would look like. Thank you.